Good evening. My name is Dr. Jeff Trant, and I'm the Executive Director of the Children's Advocacy Center of Franklin County in the North Quabbin. And it is my privilege to welcome you to tonight's forum on preventing child sexual abuse in our community, hosted by the Children's Advocacy Center, the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, and the Communities That Care Coalition. I'd like to begin by thanking Bay State Medical Center's Greenfield Family Medicine Residency Program for underwriting tonight's program. We are joined tonight by Dr. Chandra Hartman, Program Director of the Family Residency Program. Thank you, Dr. Hartman, for being with us here tonight and for your support. I would also like to recognize Phoebe Walker from the Franklin Regional Council of Governments, Kat Allen from the Communities That Care Coalition, Tricia Wells, a private practice clinician in Greenfield and a board member of MassKids, Kelly Broadway from the Children's Advocacy Center, and Jetta from MassKids for planning tonight's event. Locally, nationally, and globally, the incident rate of child sexual abuse remains at epidemic levels. Past research has estimated that approximately 1 in 10 children in the United States will be sexually abused before they turn 18, and the prevalence rate varies significantly by age and gender. For example, a 2014 study by David Finkelhor, director of the Crimes Against Children Research Center at the University of New Hampshire, found that 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 20 boys is a victim of child sexual abuse. Furthermore, other studies have shown that more than 90% of child victims of sexual abuse are abused by someone that they know. Children and families in Franklin County and the North Quabbin region are also directly impacted by sexual abuse. Since the Children's Advocacy Center first opens its doors in 2016, we have seen an average of 120 children per year who are reported to be victims of sexual abuse. In 2022 alone, 116 children received a forensic interview at the CAC. Among these children, 77% were girls and 23% were boys. 19% were under the age of 6, and 28% were between the ages of 7 and 12. And a little bit more than half, 53%, were between the ages of 13 and 17. Also, since the COVID-19 pandemic, we have seen an increasing trend in commercial sexual exploitation of children in Franklin County. Commercial sexual exploitation, or CSEC, occurs when a child agrees to, offers to, or engages in sexual conduct in exchange for shelter, food, clothing, education, money, and care. Really, anything of value. Last calendar year, the CAC had 12 CSEC cases total. This calendar year, we've already had 17 cases, and we're not halfway through the year yet. Despite these statistics, there's much to be hopeful about. The same body of research that describes the prevalence and risk factors associated with child sexual abuse have also identified protective factors that increase the well-being of children and families and reduce the likelihood of maltreatment. Tonight, we'll discuss how we as a community can work together to help end child abuse. First, we'll hear from Northwestern District Attorney David Sullivan about the importance of prevention. Next, we'll welcome our featured guest, Jetta, Executive Director of MassKids, who directs the Enough Abuse campaign. So let me introduce you to DA Sullivan. David Sullivan has served as the Northwestern District Attorney since 2011. Under his leadership, the office has embraced a community prosecution model. This approach blends smart and fair prosecutions, crime prevention, law enforcement partnership, and community collaborations that build safe communities throughout Hampshire and Franklin counties and the town of Athol. Under DA Sullivan's innovative leadership, the office has improved the criminal justice system, reduced crime and victimization, and held offenders accountable. DA Sullivan is a staunch advocate for children and families in Franklin County and, quite honestly, throughout the Commonwealth. He has served for more than a decade as a member of the Massachusetts Children's Trust Board of Directors, and he helped found the Children's Advocacy Center of Franklin County in the North Quabbin, where he continues to serve as an advisor and honorary board member. It is my pleasure to introduce DA Sullivan.
Thank you, Jeff. And thank you all for being here. One of the things that people think is that law enforcement keeps the community safe, and that's it. It's not true. It's the community that keeps it safe. The police are there to help. But when you look at child abuse, those statistics, to me, it's a national scandal that we don't take care of our kids. I didn't know these statistics until I became DA, and it instantly hit me that even if it was half that rate, it would be scandalous. But we know that the rate is even higher because there's so much unreported child abuse. Let's look at what the statistics that Dr. Trant explained. Number one, 90% of all child abuse is from people they know. It could be an uncle, could be a stepfather, it could be somebody in school. Teacher, maybe. It could be in the community, but they know them and they groom them. Most sexual abuse doesn't happen on the first meeting or second meeting. It's the grooming behavior that you might hear more of. So when I look at Franklin and North Franklin County and Athol, I see strong communities, but communities that need to be made aware of what we're dealing with. And I think that's what's happened to the Child Advocacy Center. They have outreach to communities, they're working with teachers, they're working with community groups to make sure that they're aware of what they can do. I'm the first one to say it's easier to prevent a crime than it is to prosecute it. Because as you know, child victims are so scared. Many times the perpetrator has threatened them or shamed them or done something that they don't tell anybody. And what we deal with in most cases is delayed disclosures. And I'll tell you, the juries aren't too sympathetic. They expected a 6-year-old or 7-year-old to report it within a week or two or a month. It's a big uphill battle that we have to prosecute these cases. That's not my number one priority. My number one priority is to keep kids safe. And this type of prevention program is so important because you can talk to people about the signs of child sexual abuse or how to prevent it. And you're going to hear more about that. But one of the things that happens is that children are entitled. It's a human right to be safe. And that's my first priority. Our CAC has a collaborative approach. It's a multidisciplinary team where we involve DCF, the police, social worker, folks from the CAC team, and other people from the district attorney's office. So we're aligned 100% with what their goal is, which is safety, healing, and justice. We don't get justice as much as you may think because children can't always go forward. Or the delayed disclosure is 4 or 5 years down the road, and people can't always remember things. It's not that it didn't happen, but they can't be consistent. So our number one goal is to put them in the safe place, and that's DCF, law enforcement in our office that gets involved, and obviously CAC, because they do this forensic interview. We want to keep them safe, away from the perpetrator, whether it's a family member or a relative. We want to make sure that they're safe. But the number one thing that I see, and this is where our CAC here in Franklin and North Quabbin really starts to hit it out of the park, it's the healing. We're now able to provide services for children, therapeutic services, the intervention. The team at the CAC provides the resources that obviously are needed for these children and for the parents, non-offending obviously. That's so important. The justice, to me, we have a whole team of folks. We have 4 attorneys, about 9 staff that just do child abuse cases. And that is something that changed. When I came into office, there was 1 attorney and 5 staff. Now we have 4 attorneys and 9 staff. That's important because these cases are so important to these kids' development. We want to make sure that the trauma they've experienced, which is lifelong, is reduced as much as possible. So where I see the ability to work is with all our youth organizations. When I started coaching Little League and youth basketball in East Hampton, and this probably started, well, probably about 6 years after my daughter, probably 1996. There weren't queries required. People were offended, well, we're going to lose people. And I had been a criminal defense attorney. He says, you're going to run queries, or I'm not going to coach, and nobody else is going to coach because I'll make sure of it. To believe that even that all these youth organizations refuse to run queries because they defend the volunteers. Where do drunks go? Where do they go? They go to a bar. Where do pedophiles go? Toward kids, right? The nicest people in the world, they're going to be around kids. So number one, if your youth organization doesn't have a query check and doesn't have protocols for keeping kids safe, you shouldn't be in business. You know, the YMCA, for example, what are their protocols? Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, we've seen all these statistics come forward because they didn't have protocols. They didn't listen to the statistics, or they chose to ignore them. It's so imperative that we make sure that these youth-serving organizations, Catholic Church, perpetrated incredible harm to these children because they didn't have protocols. And they also ignored the perpetrators of these crimes. So I think that what Jeff said hits it right on the mark. It's hopeful. We can prevent child abuse on so many different levels if we do it as a community and we have a concerted effort. So tonight, for many of you, maybe it's a beginning. For other people, you probably already learned a lot about this and have already taken action. But I look at everybody in this room as future ambassadors. You have the ability to spread the word, to really preach about enough abuse, to look at the training materials, and it's a tremendous ability to work with parents who are the number one folks to keep them safe. You know, there's nothing more traumatic than a mother that finds out that that stepfather has perpetrated abuse, or that mother has found somebody in the neighborhood because they missed some of the signs, or they didn't really follow what you can learn in enough abuse. So in the youth serving, there shouldn't be a youth serving organization in Franklin County or Athol that doesn't have sets of protocols. All the things that you're going to learn about tonight, hopefully you'll do some of the parent module or the youth serving. It's so important that we have these protocols for everyone. And so, you know, Franklin Council of Government, you fund these folks. Do they have these protocols? And I know I've been on the board for Children's Trust, which works with a lot of community groups. The website that's there is Safe
Kids Thrive.
Safe Kids Thrive, yeah. SafeKidsThrive.org. So if you go to SafeKids, they're going to have a lot of the same stuff that's here tonight, but they're going to have additional stuff. And they lay it all out for these youth-serving organizations, all the things that they should do, all the protocols that they should have, and procedures. And so these are the two most ferocious people, or organizations, I should say, for preventing child abuse. And I think that if you really look at it, the schools, they need to do it too. There's a lot of things. And one of the things that we find, and it's an incredible, is the internet. How many kids are getting abused and exposed to pornography and other dangerous things? We've had a number of children enticed over the internet. You know, we all know that behind that screen it could be a 14-year-old or it could be a 50-year-old. So the internet is yet another vehicle where children are being abused and traumatized and harmed. And whether the harm is emotional or that they get involved in a relationship online that's way out of their league, it's another thing that we need to be careful of. So, I'm going to actually, I was going to have everybody stand and take an oath as an ambassador of preventing child abuse, but I don't want to have you do that tonight. No, I'm very honored to be here tonight, and it's my passion. You know, I grew up in a big family, and I have 3 daughters, and I don't want a single child to be abused in Franklin County, Hampshire County, or anywhere else, because we could have prevented it. We could have made that difference for that person just by listening tonight to what Enough Abuse has to tell us, but also that we have to have the will to keep it going and to make sure that we keep spreading the word. So, and I want to thank Dr. Trant in particular. He's taken over the helm of the CAC of Franklin County in North Quab, and you're doing a great job. Keep it up, Jeff.
Thank you, DA Sullivan. And we are so fortunate to have such a progressive and a child and family-centered district attorney as we have here in Franklin County. So we are so just privileged to have you, Dave, represent us and our kids. Next, I'd like to introduce Jetta Bernier. Jetta is the executive director of MassKids, a 60-year-old child advocacy organization where she directs Enough Abuse, a community mobilization and citizen education initiative to prevent child sexual abuse. Developed under a 5-year grant from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, officially there, they have called it, quote, a trailblazing effort to prevent child sexual abuse by building a movement of concerned citizens, community by community, end quote. Several states, 2 countries have adopted Enough Abuse comprehensive model. Jetta is author of A Call to Action for Policymakers and Advocates, Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Legislation in the States, and Sexual Abuse Safe Child Standards, a policy guide for schools and youth organizations. She is developer of Enough, Preventing Child Sexual Abuse in My School, an e-learning course selected by the U.S. Department of Justice for inclusion in its National Repository of Promising Effective Crime Prevention Programs, which really is the step on the way towards being validated and recognized as an evidence-based practice, which is a really big deal. Because for anyone who's familiar with evidence-based practices and the rigorous process of going through randomized clinical trials, you know, to actually be able to scientifically and empirically validate that what they're saying works, actually is accomplishing the intended outcome, is a really big deal, right? So that's kind of no understatement. And Pledge to Prevent, a unique online action campaign that engages citizens to take specific actions to prevent child sexual abuse in their homes and communities. She chairs the policy committee of the National Coalition to Prevent Child Sexual Abuse and Exploitation and leads the state's Policy Exchange, a bi-monthly platform for policymakers and advocates working on prevention legislation in their states. Please join me in welcoming Jetta.
Can you get me the video just quickly? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Trant, for your nice introduction. And it's so good to meet you, DA Sullivan. When you said this is my passion, I said, he's my guy. I've had this passion to prevent child abuse for my whole career, actually. So it's wonderful to always meet new advocates. I want to start out tonight by showing you a brief video, 5 minutes. I wish the room was dark. I wish the screen was larger because I think that it's very easy to get fixated on this screen and listen to the power that it brings. It talks not only about the devastating issue of child sexual abuse, but I hope it will leave you with a great deal of hope and promise that if we come together, we can really make a change, a real social change, a lasting social change. So I'm just going to see if Dr. Trant can help me. Let's see if we can get this video up. Let me, we've had a few little difficulties here.
I got it.
There you go, the silent epidemic. Okay, we started at the beginning. We can move the, we should start it at the beginning. Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
He's my tech guy. Thank you very much, Dr. Trant. Okay. All right. Well, there were a lot of towns that were listed on that Enough Abuse video, but there are many, many more that have come to the table, and people like you across this part of the state are coming towards us and saying, what can we do together? What is it that we can do in our schools, in our youth organizations, in our homes, all across our community? So I want to share with you some basic information. Some of it D.A. Sullivan covered, but there's a lot of information to know, and I'm going to save some of the discussion towards the end to talk about what this community, what this county can be doing in very, very specific, concrete terms. So let me move this up here. Okay. It's not. Dr. Trant. Why didn't it move? I don't know why. Okay, all right. You know, we really want to continue to be trauma-informed because we know that within this room, some of you have friends who have been victims of child sexual abuse. Somebody in your own family may have been involved in cases like this, and you yourself may be a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. In fact, some of you may even have someone in your family who has perpetrated child sexual abuse. So it's a pretty extensive problem, and we want to make sure that if anything that we share tonight with you is uncomfortable or disturbing, please feel free to just get up, go out, get some water, take a break. Dr. Trant is here later for some of you if you would like to talk to him about a particular situation. But I just wanted to make sure that you know that your being here tonight is seen as a very important and brave thing to do if you have had this problem in your life. So first we're going to spend a little time just talking about the public health of child sexual abuse. Some of the statistics have been mentioned. We'll go through them fairly quickly. But I want to also talk about what are the conditions that have allowed this to thrive generation after generation. And also, importantly, preventing child sexual abuse. What can we do proactively to make sure that child sexual abuse is essentially not allowed in our society any longer? So let's get started. Just a quick definition. Clearly that any activity between an adult and a child is abusive. It's illegal. It's usually an exploitation of power and trust. Even sexual activity between two children, particularly if they are 3 or 4 years older, one and from the other, if one has more power in the relationship, that can also be abusive. And we can do a whole other presentation just on understanding and responding to sexual behaviors of children. Maybe that's something for a later time. We know that sexual abuse includes both touching and also non-touching offenses. And I think that most people believe that when they hear the word child sexual abuse, they believe that it involves rape. But some of the data tells us that probably in about 15% of cases, there's actual penetration. The highest amount of rape happens about 22% of the time, usually with 16 to 17-year-old females. Interestingly, the penetration rate for boys is very, very small, perhaps 1%. The sibling incest rape, however, is very high at 71%. And that is even more than the stepfathers, 27%, and fathers at about 35%. So I think that intrafamilial incest issue is a very concerning one. It's a little difficult to have this behind me here. These are some of the touching behaviors. And again, you can read faster than I can speak, so I'm not going to be reading slides. I'm looking at you to kind of take in all of this information, and I will kind of make some comments so that we can get through all of these slides this evening in some fair amount of time. Non-touching behaviors are also very important, and they can include, exposing oneself to a child, taking provocative photographs of them, showing pornography to children as a way of grooming them, for example, communicating with them in these days, again, by social media, through email, and also in person and on the phone. In terms of the statistics, D.A. Sullivan was right. We've got about 1 in 10 estimated victims, about 1 in 4, 1 in 5 girls, 1 in 20 boys self-report having experienced sexual abuse at least once during their childhood by either an adult or a peer. I have to tell you sadly that the rates of child-on-child sexual abuse appear to be significantly higher than we even had suspected. The figure 40% has been bandied about for a number of years. Based on some of the work that Dr. Finkelhor has done, we're now looking at 60-70% of cases. I'm happy to tell you that with Dr. Trent's leadership and others here in the community, the issue of problematic sexual behaviors of children is really being looked at very seriously. And so that's a good step in that direction. We know that about a third of sexual abuse is committed by family members, and in about 60% of other members in the community, clergy, school individuals, and others in various sports activities and that kind of other thing. So who sexually abuses children? We know, again, the statistics are changing a little bit frequently, but 87% of known abuse is committed by males, 13% by females, but we now know that the female rate is increasing. We know that those who have been convicted, adult male sex offenders, these are the folks that have convicted in prison. If you look at them and compare them to non-offending males, you can see that they're twice as likely to have been physically abused, 3 times more likely to have experienced some kind of sexual abuse, and 13 times more likely to have experienced emotional abuse, verbal abuse, that type of thing. The vast majority of those who abuse children are heterosexual. This is not a gay issue at all, even though I think there was an attempt earlier when the clergy abuse crisis happened to think that this was only gay priests. This is really a heterosexual issue. More than half of those who commit crimes against children report that their first crime was committed before the age of 18. So in a way, that's a hopeful thing, because if we can really focus on youth and make sure that they have healthy sexual behaviors, we can prevent a lot of these issues from happening. This is an interesting slide that I always like to show because, people say, well, how come I can't identify this person? How come they don't have 3 heads? They look like we do. Their private behavior may be very different than their public behavior, and so it's not difficult for us to become clear that they're not people that are easily identified. If you look at this group of about 16,000 child molesters, these are known admitted child molesters, and you compare them against kind of your average American male, and you look at the percentage that were married or formerly married, and again, the orange bar are the admitted molesters, you can see that they're fairly identical. Some college, again, fairly identical. High school graduates, working, and then even to the extent that they describe themselves as religious. So no wonder that it's been difficult for us to identify who these individuals are. Women also abuse, as we mentioned, and there are a number of characteristics that separate them sometimes from the males who abuse. In some of the serious cases of incest within the family by the mother herself has had a history of incest or psychological problems, depression, even personality disorder, where it's really the distinction between the parent and the child is very blurred. Those are real psychiatric kinds of issues. But then there's another group of women who find themselves involved in relationships with adult male partners where they are the more passive of the pair. They're dependent, maybe for emotional support, perhaps for finances, childcare, whatever it might be. And so we find in some of those cases that women are actually coerced into engaging themselves in sexual abuse of their children, allowing images of their children, for example, to be photographed and put online for sale. I mean, it's interesting when I'm doing this presentation, when I make reference to certain things, I get flashbacks of specific cases. When I just said that, I'm thinking about Salem, where a mom was accused of essentially selling her daughter because the boyfriend thought this was really important to do. In any case, then we have not a new phenomenon, but a growing phenomenon. This notion of this perceived romantic or sexual mentoring. The high school teacher who's involved with a 14-year-old boy. We are seeing more and more of these cases. Although educator sexual misconduct, which is becoming much, much more in the public's eye, we still are seeing about 53% involving male and about 47% involving females. So again, it's almost even within that school setting. Educator sexual misconduct. Now, I always have to say that 99% of the people who teach our children are kind, loving, caring educators who want the best for our kids. But we do know, based on a 2004 study that was commissioned by the U.S. Department of Education, they found that more than 4.5 million students, or about 10% of children in public schools across our country, report that they were subject to some kind of inappropriate sexual contact with an adult in their school sometime between K through 12th grade. This is a very startling statistic, and we stood up and took notice. Unfortunately, the funding has not been there to repeat this study, and some people think that it's now even worse. I don't know, we'll see. We're really working hard at MassKids on this particular issue within schools. As the Children's Trust has taken on great work around informing and educating youth-serving organizations, we like to consider ourselves complementary in that right now our focus is a lot on the schools across the state. We know that teachers and coaches were involved in about a third of the cases, and all these other individuals working in the schools, security guards, bus drivers, account for the rest of them. In terms of, again, we don't want to get into too much here tonight. I really want to get into the prevention and what can we do about it, but I think it's important to give you a little sense about the fact that not everybody who sexually abuses a child is a pedophile. I mean, pedophilia is a very specific psychiatric condition. We do know that there are a subgroup of those who offend, who are what we call preferential abusers. They prefer children, usually prepubescent children. There are some who prefer children who are 14 and over. We call that hebephilia. But in any case, the good thing about this is that this is not the greatest group. Those who have a clear psychiatric condition, this is not the greatest group in terms of the number of offenders. Another group that is also not the greatest number, but very, very damaging in terms of their actions, are the sociopathic or psychopathic abusers. They lack empathy, they feel they're entitled, and they're the ones that commit the most heinous crimes that you read about. You know, a child being kidnapped in the middle of the night, a child being buried half alive after having been sexually abused, those really awful, horrendous cases that we hear about. These individuals are real psychopaths or sociopaths. Luckily, they don't comprise the largest percentage of those who abuse. This last one, however, does. The situational abuser. This is a person who uses children for their own intimacy. They may have difficulty with peer relationships. And there may be other things happening in their lives. You know, they may be depressed. They may be overusing alcohol or drugs. They may have a spouse who is not available to them because of illness or some other reason. And so they find themselves on this slippery slope of boundary-violating behaviors that sometimes will lead them to entering into sexual relationships with children. A lot of those who are in schools are not true pedophiles. They are people who have these various other issues happening in their lives, and so they find themselves sexually involving themselves with children and youth. The last category, which researcher Anna Salter has written quite a lot about, is that sometimes you're faced with an abuser who was the upstanding member of the community, had a great wife, had a bunch of great kids, had a good paying job, was well regarded in the community, and they still chose to sexually abuse a child. So we're still learning a lot in the field about why this happens, but that at least gives you kind of a snapshot view. And we know that those who are looking to get help can be helped to some extent with sex offender specific treatment. I'm not talking about the social worker who puts her sign out and can just do counseling with anybody. I'm talking about people who've been specifically trained to deal with this. Here in Massachusetts, we have MATSA, the Mass Association for the Treatment of Sexual Abusers. There are actually individuals who have been trained to work with those who abuse. Successful treatment is much more likely if you know that the abuser is taking full responsibility for their actions. They're not trying to say it was her fault, her skirt was too short, or, you know, I was just trying to teach her the ways of the world. If there is this sense of it was not her fault or his fault, I take true accountability, that's going to lead to a much more successful treatment. There are situations where if a person is employed in a stable job, if they have good housing, if you've got a vigilant social support system, and they get ongoing treatment, that can reduce the recidivism as well. Based on some of the meta-analyses that have been done on treatment, they actually talk about a 13% recidivism rate over 5 years for those who commit sexual abuses. Most people think it's just the other way around. It's 87% must recidivate. But the data is telling us that it's closer to 13%. Go on here. So what are the conditions that support child sexual abuse? Well, the secrecy, which is caused by the tactics of those who would groom and abuse children. Also, the silence that we have all kind of owned up to, right, in our communities, in our families. And then the outright denial. So just want to give you a few examples of how that might play out. Some of the secrecy. If you tell, we won't be able to go to ball games and the movies anymore. Again, having a kid feel like in order for them to get something that they like or that meets their needs, they have to put up with this abuse. Don't tell your mom or I'll have to leave and she'll have to pay the rent herself. Again, a single mom needing a lot of support. This is something that a child is not going to want to wreck. Fathers can teach their girls about sex like this. It's not a big deal. I know women in Western Mass whose fathers essentially used that line, and they didn't know that this was wrong until they got into high school. If you tell, they'll think you're gay. Thinking of a case in Middleton, Massachusetts, where a counselor was involved in multiple sexual relationships with multiple boys. And he would say to them, well, I can see from the way your body reacts that you might like this. So that the children felt that they were not able to tell anyone because they felt like they were in it. They were in it with the person, okay? Even though their bodies were simply doing what bodies do when they're sexually excited. Okay, so more secrecy tactics. Nobody will believe you anyway. How easy is it for someone who is the most popular teacher in school, who is confronted with a sixth grader who says, he touched me. People don't want to believe that their colleague would do anything like that. And so we have cases, I'm thinking of a woman in Gloucester, a teacher in Gloucester, who had serial relationships with young teenage boys. And to this day, she was an older woman, to this day, because she essentially pled guilty, everyone says it's because she wanted to spare the kids having to go to court. And so she was kind of the martyr. And to this day, they believe that she never did it. But I know the lawyer who talked to all of these victims, and clearly this was a pattern with her. So your family will be angry, disgusted, they'll stop loving you. We'll both go to jail. You don't want to send your grandpa to jail. We won't be able to go fishing in the summer anymore. That kind of guilt tripping is really, we hear about that often. Your family will be deported, kind of a new thing with the immigration issues. If you tell, I'll hurt you, your family, or your pet. There's a woman sitting in this room tonight who told me her story earlier today. And this abuser basically told her 6-year-old child, if you tell anyone, I will kill you. So this, again, doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes this kind of threatening statements can be used to make children feel afraid that they don't want to tell. They can't tell anyone. Some of the kinds of things you might see at school. Our relationship is special. We need to keep this our secret. If you tell anyone, I'll lose my job. I'll even lose my license. You're so mature for your age. That's why I was attracted to you. You're so different from the other kids your age. Again, trying to create that special relationship. Nobody understands you the way that I do. When you graduate, we'll be able to go off together. This is a fallacy that is believed by so many young youth who find themselves engaged in a sexual relationship with their teacher. So now, also the silence in families. Well, this couldn't happen to my kids. I don't have to bring it up because my kids tell me everything. One of the fathers whose child was sexually abused by a clergy person met with me and said, I never thought I had to discuss this with him because my kid, we have a great relationship. He shares everything with me, but he never shared that fact with his father. I don't have to worry. All the people we know are nice. This is a very common thing. You've all seen television news when someone's been accused of sexual abuse, and all the neighbors are, they have a microphone in front of their face, and they're saying, but he was so nice. He was so nice. Well, one of this One researcher has made this very clear statement, and he says, niceness is not a personality trait. It's a decision. If those who abuse children were not nice, they wouldn't be able to get the support of those around them. They wouldn't be able to cover their behavior. And so, of course, most people who abuse children in this kind of setting are considered nice. In fact, Dr. Shakeshaft, who did the study for the Department of Education, found that teachers who are popular, the best teacher, the most popular teacher, are overrepresented in the number of cases within schools. They become the Pied Piper. Don't call me Mr. Smith, call me Joe. They become almost, they almost kind of blur the proper boundaries between a teacher and a student in order to gain the student's engagement with them. So these are things that we're learning as we go. Some people don't feel comfortable discussing sexual things with their kids. My parents never talked to me about it, and I figured it out. I'll wait until my child is older. I remember a woman who worked at Assumption College. She was abused by her pediatrician for several years. Her parents never knew anything about it. And, when she talked with her mother said, well, I meant to talk to you about these things, but I thought I would just wait until you were older. Well, she was 8 years old when this happened. So it isn't, it's something that has to be dealt with. A lack of knowledge about how to approach it. Well, I don't even know where to begin. A lot of parents feel that they just don't even know how to start the conversation. And they say, well, the school will handle it. The school handles issues around puberty, so they'll just handle it. I don't have to worry about it. Or, I don't even know what I would do, so I don't want to know about it. I'm going to stick my head in the sand, and I'm just going to pretend that I don't have to deal with this. It's not in my life, not going to be in my child's life. These are the kinds of things that have contributed to the silence that we've seen across our culture. Maybe she's lying to get attention. Well, we know that children rarely lie. Some of the state statistics are, 1-2%. In fact, what we're learning, and I'm sure Dr. Trant can talk about this, is that sometimes children don't even disclose fully. They disclose a little bit because they're waiting to see what kind of reaction is going to happen. If everyone gets furious and upset, and if one part of the family is pitted against another part of the family and who believes who, that can be a signal to a child that I don't want to tell anymore. So there's almost a kind of not full disclosure rather than kids just going out and lying. This is not a badge of honor for kids. Kids don't want to be able to be seen as a victim, okay? My brother-in-law, he would never do that. He's a normal guy. Well, Senator Joan Lovely, who is a big champion of child sexual abuse here in the state, she had a relative that moved in with her, and he abused both her and her twin brother. And finally, many years later, when her own children were the age at which she was when she was sexually abused, it all came back to her. Unfortunately, her brother is now in jail because of some of sexual acts that he's committed. And so, unfortunately, both of those children were not really able to get the help they needed at the time. It would ruin our family if this ever came out. There's that family bubble. We don't want anybody to know what's happening inside our family. It's our business. And so there's some of that also that makes people feel that they just don't want to open up this can of worms. So look, as a result of all that, right, adults are not adequately protecting children from people who might abuse them. We're not communicating to our kids about a major safety risk. We talk to them about, what happens if your clothes gets caught on fire, how you should cross the street. There's all kinds of things that kids are told from an early age. But we're not communicating to them about this major safety risk. And so as a result, most communities have not been mobilized for prevention. But again, many communities are now beginning to take that step forward. And we're so happy to be with you here tonight to support you in your efforts. So we need to educate ourselves about recognizing some of the behavior signs that might suggest, because frankly, there is no checklist. There is no checklist. We can only ask questions gently. We can only be vigilant and just keep our eyes open. So here are some of the common tactics of those who would sexually abuse. They're often socially adept, likable, and nice. As I said earlier, for them, niceness is not a personality decision, personality trait. It is a calculated decision. They can be patient and build trust slowly over time before they actually abuse. For them, for those pedophiles particularly, there's something about the game that is important. In other words, they might go into a school or a youth organization, look around, figure out who's the kid that seems to be by him or herself, who's the kid whose mother never picks him up on time, who's the child that seems to be a wallflower, who's the child that doesn't have a father figure. They're looking to see who the kid in the group might be more vulnerable that they can approach, because their goal is to make sure that the kid isn't going to tell and will be dependent on them. They may select jobs that are legitimate, give them legitimate access to kids so they can carefully choose their preferred victims. They may befriend, date, or move in with a single parent to gain access to their children. This has often been the case that we've heard of several cases like that. They may befriend the children who, I just said that, believe that they're needier and they need special attention. So those are the kinds of kids that are at greater risk. Kids who have physical disabilities and developmental disabilities are believed to be more likely to be manipulated. And even if they tell, they're less likely to be believed, according to some pedophiles. And so we see that those with disabilities are, based on different studies, 3 to 7 times more likely to be victims. Children who are deaf are particularly vulnerable. The rates are really very, very high, particularly for female deaf children. And so we have to always be looking at those especially vulnerable children to protect. Again, they try to build dependency and attachment by giving gifts, take you to the movies every Saturday, here's some money, here's some special treats, some special privileges. So we ask you, do you know an adult who prefers his adult time with children? I think about Mr. Magano, 34-year veteran teacher in Maynard, Massachusetts. He was everybody's favorite guy, giving to the library, seen as very generous. He would even give kids, his special kids, his used car when he bought a new car. And everyone thought, what a generous guy he is. Well, one kid decided to come forward to talk about the abuse. That child was ostracized, couldn't go to school. He was just pillared on social media. And then all of a sudden the police were getting a call from someone who had graduated 2 years before, and then another who had graduated 5 years before. They began to realize that this had been his modus operandi for his entire career in the Maynard school system. He had abused many, many children. And he spent his free time. He was living with his mother. In his basement, he had every game you can imagine. The kids would go there. It was the favorite place to go to. Fortunately, Mr. Magano met his end by a heart attack about 2 weeks before the trial was scheduled. The victims didn't get their day in court, but at least he was out of service. Anyway, finds ways to be alone with a child or teen when adults are not likely to interrupt, offering to babysit, doing special trips. When I read that, I think about priests in the clergy who were involved in sexual abuse. Numerous victims would say, well, it happened when Father Joe was driving me to practice, and he would reach over and touch me in my private parts, and I didn't know what to do. I was so shocking, I didn't know what to do, and so I froze. This is often a common response. And kids said, well, I could either do nothing, or I could scream, but nobody would hear me, or I could jump out of the car, but then that would be, that could really be damaging to me. And so just the shock of it, the unexpected nature of it, often kids just don't know what to do. They just can't compute all of this. Anyway, and then special trips, going to various camps that were owned by clergy, and children being abused there. Do you know someone who ignores a child or teen's verbal or physical cues that they don't want to be touched or hugged or kissed? We have to grow our children to be people who can say, I don't want that. I don't want Aunt Bertha to give me a sloppy, wet kiss every time she comes over, And mostly as parents, what we have done usually is to say, oh no, but give her a kiss. Give her a kiss, right? We don't hear our children when they say they want their space. So we need to tell ourselves, we need to say to Aunt Bertha, Aunt Bertha, he's not into this. Why don't you just give her a high five? and let's call it a day. We need to help parents feel comfortable helping their children set boundaries, okay? Kids need to feel safe. So do you know someone who has a different special child or teen friend of a particular age or appearance from year to year? This really relates to the true pedophile. The pedophile that is attracted to a 7-year-old, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, slightly built boy. Okay, so after the game, that's the kid that gets to go with the coach to get ice cream. The other kids don't get to go. And then maybe 2 years from there, it's not Jimmy anymore, now it's Joey. And Joey's got the same kind of appearance. So again, be vigilant, be looking at people's behavior, not who you think they are, but really be, and trust your gut, because sometimes we have, in hindsight, we felt, I never really felt quite comfortable around him. I always kind of thought it was a little, we have to trust that instinct and be willing to ask questions, not in an accusatory way, but in a way that allows us to get more information from our kids about how they feel around that person, that kind of thing. Again, giving money to teens or gifts for no particular occasion. Somebody who doesn't respect a child's or teen's privacy in the bathroom, in the changing room, or in the locker room. I mean, we all know what Sandusky did, right? At Penn State with these kids. I mean, they had no privacy in the changing rooms and locker rooms. He was showering with the kids. You would never see that today. People understand that that's just over the line. Asks a child or teen to discuss sexual experiences or feelings. Beyond the birds and the bees conversation. A parent doesn't need to be talking about their sex life in front of a child. Or asking the child, oh, you went out on a date last night, did you get any? Or making kind of crude comments like that. Those are flags, those are red flags. And other people in the family should understand that when those boundaries are crossed, they need to be accounted for. Let's go on. Anyone who's viewing child sexual abuse images, child pornography, either videotapes, photos on the internet, this is against the law. So if you're living with someone who you know is doing this, you need to get them to stop, because there are many individuals here in Massachusetts that have been the result of a sting. Teachers, upstanding members of the community who have been going on these online social media rooms and not only sometimes downloading images, but even uploading images. Sometimes if you upload images, new images, you get certain points so that you can download more images. I mean, I'm thinking of a teacher in Newton who was caught in a sting like that. So it's all around us, and these particular cases absolutely must be reported. One of the ways to reduce, this kind of opportunity for sexual abuse, at least, is to try to increase supervision. Plan activities that involve several kids and adults. Try to eliminate these one-on-one situations whenever possible, but sometimes it's not possible. We want our kids to experience the world, right? So we don't want to keep them in a bubble. So we have to really be planful about how and when we allow them, for example, to get involved in private lessons, music lessons, tutoring, sports. The best thing to do is for parents to ask, what are the policies of this soccer club? Do you have a protocol that I can see that talks about when people are going to be allowed to be alone with children, or what? Just asking the question puts everybody on notice. And if the person responds in a negative way, you should take your kids out of that program. Because the person who really cares about kids is going to say, I'm so glad you asked. Yeah, we do have this. Let me share that with you. Full transparency. I think it's also important to establish body safety and privacy rules in your family. So, you can say to a kid, we respect each other in our house. So, Joey, don't barge into your teenage sister's bedroom. You need to knock on the door first. If mom and dad are in our special room, you need to just not barge in either. And we will tell you that when you're in the shower, no one's going to come in. We will respect each other's privacy. It's important to build that within the family early on, so that when they are outside in the world and something happens that seems to, counter that particular practice, it raises an issue for them, and hopefully they will tell. So how do we know if a kid has been abused? And again, there's no checklist, because a lot of the issues that kids deal with as they grow older can express themselves in different behavioral ways. Okay, So you have to really kind of, just again, ask gentle questions, just be inquisitive. So do you know some of these behavior signs? A kid that's unwilling or afraid to be left in the care of a particular person or play with a particular child. Again, you know, if a little kid says, I don't want Jimmy to come and play with me, and if the mom says, well, yeah, but her mother and I are really good friends and I want to have her over, what is that about? Why is Jimmy saying he doesn't want this kid to come over? Again, asking questions. If a child's behavior appears to change drastically when a particular person is present, you know, you've got an outgoing kid and usually they're bubbly and they're friendly with everybody, and as soon as Uncle Joe visits at Thanksgiving, it's like, I'm going to my room. I don't want to deal with him. What is that about? Just be watchful. If your child is uncomfortable discussing some details of how their time was spent with another adult, again, always asking, not in an accusatory way, but, so, you went on a trip with so-and-so, or, you know, can you tell me, what did you like best about that excursion? You know, just a way to kind of get the communication going is really important. If you've got young kids using new words for genitalia or for sexual behavior, or if they're using dolls and toys to kind of act out sexual scenarios, you know, like in school during playtime, that's a signal. What is that about? If you have a child who's so engaged in chronic masturbation that they can't redirect themselves to be part of the group, that's a problem. And again, we have another curriculum that deals with this notion of what are the green light behaviors in terms of sexual behaviors of children versus the yellow and then the red light behaviors. You know, a little 4-year-old who's in daycare and who is taking a nap in the corner on a little cot and who's essentially self-pleasuring, that's not an issue. That's a developmentally expected behavior, okay? However, if the little kid comes into the circle and they're all talking about what they did this weekend, and you know the child has her hands in her pants and can't be redirected, that's a problem. Why? Because the child is causing other children to feel uncomfortable, and it may, in a way, ostracize them or isolate them from the rest of the group. That begins to be a yellow light behavior. What's going on here? And again, there's so many incidences of cases in which children were seen to be, you know, maybe involved in really terrible sexual behavior, which turned out to be nothing at all. You know, a child who's, I'm thinking about the little girl with the hands in her pants. Well, you know, the school acted appropriately. They didn't go nuts. They told the parents. They took her to the pediatrician. They found out she had UTI. And of course, you know, this was what, so she was on a certain course of antibiotics. She came back to school a few weeks later. She was fine. Another incident of two little boys in a bathroom. Teacher says, where are the kids? They haven't come back from the recess. What's going on? She walks in the room. She sees one little boy standing and the other little boy is kneeling down and fiddling in the pants of the little boy who's standing. Well, that teacher didn't go crazy. She was the adult in the room. She basically said, I don't know what's happening. Can someone please explain to me what's going on? It turned out the guy has his shirt caught in his zipper, and the little friend was just trying to help him with it, okay? So we can't just jump to every conclusion just because if we see something. We have to, and I say that because there was one case in Massachusetts where this little boy, he was I think a 5-year-old boy, sitting on the floor where the kids were all there, and he was snapping the waistband of the pants of the girl in front of him. And he kept doing it. And he was told he had to leave that program. And they called him the little pedophile. When we heard of that, we just said, we need to train child care workers to know what is the developmentally expected behavior, you know, that can be redirected. You know, you can be involved in your room if you're a teenager and you want to express yourself. You could do it in your room, but you don't do it Saturday night when we have guests at the dinner table. You know, that's private behavior, and this is a public setting. There are ways to negotiate all of that. Anyway, let me go on. Obviously, kids are using alcohol and drugs like adults do to kind of dampen the stress and the trauma that they feel from what could be sexual abuse or any other kind of thing. Maybe they're upset because their grades are going down and they know their parents are upset. Or maybe somebody's offered them drugs in the schoolyard, or someone's bullying them. We can't jump to the conclusion when we see a lot of these signs, because we know that sometimes children express those behaviors when other things are going on. This is important for you all to know, because we know that children who experience trauma, whether it's from physical abuse or sexual abuse, are having difficulty with learning and academic development. And so this should make every superintendent, every principal, every teacher stand up and take notice. We know that some of because of the trauma and the changes in the brain that it causes, from this flush of chemicals, if you will, that it affects the brain architecture. And that we see memory scores are less, below average grades, repeating grades, enrolled in remedial classes, not graduating at the highest level. So it's important for us to take note of this, because these are some of the behavior signs we might see in schools. Changes in actual school performance and grades. A kid who was getting A's and now she's getting C's. What's that about? What's happening in her life? Inability to concentrate and pay attention in class. Maybe the child was up most of the night hoping the stepfather wouldn't walk into the room and sexually abuse her. Apathetic about refusing to do homework. Just shifting their entire focus away from normal activities. More school absences, not wanting to just go to school. And then sometimes unusual, aggressive, or irritable behavior that wasn't there before. Again, this could be the result of other things happening in the life of the child. And so I think the role of adults is really to ask these questions, to try not to be intrusive or try to make judgments without a lot more information. So again, physical signs of possible sexual abuse. Most sexual abuse, there will not be actual signs. That's because a lot of sexual activity doesn't leave signs. You can fondle a child, you can do all kinds of things and not leave any signs. And we've even heard from a number of pediatricians that have been in our trainings that, particularly with females, the female genitalia heals very, very quickly. And so sometimes there could have been penetration, but you really can't definitively know that. So here are some signs that you might see. Headaches, chronic. Teachers, school nurses, I think, are really at the forefront of being able to see some of these behaviors. Eating disorders. We know that the study that was done by Kaiser Permanente and CDC on adverse childhood experiences, actually, we know that those who find themselves morbidly obese, when we look back into their histories, they talk about how they overate because they didn't want to be attractive. They thought it would make the abuser feel less interested in them. I know this from working with a number of survivors of childhood sexual abuse, that this is not an uncommon thing that they talk about. Sleeping problems, nightmares, trouble walking or sitting. If you're an observant teacher, if a child has been raped the night before, they might come to school, they're probably not walking right. Again, picking up all these different signs. Complaints of pain upon urination, that's likely to be something that you would know as a parent, not obviously a school personnel. Let me just grab a little. And again, this is mostly parents, but any irritations and abrasions, swelling, tears around the genitalia clearly is something that should be investigated. Any unexplained injuries around the mouth might be the result of forced oral sex. STIs, UTIs, even teenage pregnancies. I mean, we need to be asking, who is the person who helped you create this pregnancy? Maybe it's not the boyfriend down the street. Maybe it's not the teenage boys. It could very well be the father or the stepfather. And so we need to just be brave enough to ask those questions in a gentle, probing way. All right. I want to tell you, I just think this is always interesting when there are social workers in the audience. Dr. Salter reports a case involving 327 MSWs. And they asked the MSWs this question: which one of these factors contribute to a higher level of trauma experienced by children or teens? Is it the younger age of the child will result in more trauma? Or it happens so many times that that increases the trauma? That penetration happened instead of just fondling? And if the abuse was violent? And they all said, yes, 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 yes. Then they asked the same question to 282 adult survivors, and there were no correlations found. Why do you think that was? What do you think was the greatest contributing factor to increased trauma among those survivors? Do you have any sense of what that would be?
Younger age.
Pardon?
I would say younger age.
Well, let me just, before I tell you the answer. If you have a 3-year-old child who's been sexually abused, nobody can say she wanted it or she should have said something, right? And so the support around that young child is likely to be even greater. So maybe the trauma isn't so great. The frequency of the abuse. If you have a child who's been fondled, let's say every night, Uncle Joe watches the news and Jane sits on his lap and he fondles her under her clothes. But there's no penetration. Every night, that's the routine. Mom's in the kitchen, cooking, cleaning, and the kid feels trapped in this. The frequency of that, even though there might not have been penetration, will be more traumatic in many cases, at least according to this group of survivors, than if the abuse, if there had been penetration. Again, if the abuse was violent, particularly if the abuser was not anybody that the child trusted. If you have a neighbor, for example, that violently abuses the child, again, because the rallying around that child might make that child feel less trauma. Again, who are we to kind of quantify, right, who feels what trauma? But the point is that according to all those survivors, it was the time spent in secrecy that was the most associated with the degree of trauma that they felt. So that's an important thing we need to listen to, right? Because I think that parents can build the skills to encourage communication and discourage secrecy. And I think that's a very concrete thing that parents can work on. And I think we need to think broader than behavior signs, because what we do know from some of the research that I've reviewed, that particularly little kids, they're looking for adults to help them explain the world. Why is this happening? Why do I feel weird about this? I don't know. And so dialogue is often the way that kids will try to understand the world. But they often need an occasion or an opportunity to do it. And so if we can get parents to be more sensitive to these verbal cues and understand the meaning behind what the children are trying to tell us, we might be in a better position. Let me just give you a couple of quick examples. A mom announces she's meeting a friend for dinner tomorrow. Sue will be the babysitter. And Tim says he doesn't like the idea. Tim's pouting about it. Uncle Jim calls to say he's coming over to pick up little Jake. He's going to take him to the mall. The older brother is also not happy about this. Then you've got Mr. Smith's wife who's in the hospital. And the neighbor, Steve, and his 15-year-old daughter, Ann, say they're going to go over every day and help him clean the house, prepare some meals, okay? But the daughter is not going over there. The father says, you made a promise. You really need to go over there. So what we have a couple of options here. First of all, in the first case, the child is questioning the actual rules. Well, does Sue have to babysit me? Or why does Jake have to go with Uncle Joe to the mall? Or do I really have to go to Mr. Smith's? And sometimes children will even challenge the rules. Why can't we do something else? Why can't Jane or Grandma come to babysit? Why can't we all go to the mall together? The kid is trying to problem solve. Why can't he just hire somebody else to do his house cleaning? But the way that parents can respond is in two ways. They can respond without question. Sue is nice. She charges less than the other babysitters, so don't argue. End of conversation. Uncle Joe likes to do things with Jake. We don't want to disappoint. And why you sound like you're being jealous, criticizing the child for bringing this up. Mr. Smith expects you. You can't break your promise. But some parents can respond with questions. Don't you like Sue, your babysitter? Do you have fun with her when she comes to the house? What kind of games do you play? Does she say or do things that you don't like? Opening the door to allow a child who's trying to figure out this thing, trying to help the child understand that you're there and you're really listening. Or are you upset because Uncle Joe didn't invite you? Do you feel left out? No, I don't feel left out. It's just that, Little Jake is telling me that he doesn't like to go with Uncle Jim because, he does funny things with him. What about going over to Mr. Smith? Don't you like? Well, you might find that the child says, well, when I was over there last week, I was doing the dishes. Mr. Smith came up behind me and fondled my breasts while I was doing the dishes. And I just felt so upset. I didn't know what to do. Well, clearly, you're not just breaking your promise. You don't want to go there. It's not a safe place to be. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, and we could spend so much more time on all of this, but what I'm trying to say is that, look at not just the behavioral signs and the physical signs, but look at the verbal cues. What are kids talking to you about? What are they trying to say? Are they questioning something? Are they then trying to go further and challenging something? Try to respond with open-ended questions. Listen, drop everything, and just try to listen, because that could really be an occasion for a disclosure. So we need to talk about tips for parents. We should start talking to kids about privacy and private and personal space as early as age 3. We don't have to talk about sexual abuse. We don't use those words at that age, but privacy and body boundaries are important. We can say to kids, to parents, only allow those you trust to provide bathroom and bathing care for your child. Encourage independence in personal care as early as you can. Don't just let anybody go into the bathroom and take care of your child's bathroom needs. Introduce the concept of okay touch, not okay touch. Let's put to rest good touch and bad touch. For many, many reasons, kids should not be in a position of having to decide if grandpa's fondling them inappropriately is bad touch. How can it be bad if grandpa is good and he loves me? Having a kid have to manage with good and evil, it's too much for children to have to handle. Okay and not okay is a little bit more neutral. Discouraging, and pediatricians have talked about the need for this, discouraging co-bathing with siblings and adults once your child begins elementary school. And supervise bathing before this time to try to discourage that sibling incest that I talked to you about earlier that is so high. And then teach the children to respect adults and siblings' privacy. It's a two-way street. These are real things that parents can say. All body parts have names and can be talked about respectfully. And then we talk about the names for these private parts, not pocketbook and all kinds of other names that people have given genitalia over the years. It's a problem. And I talk about pocketbook, I'm thinking of a mother who told her daughter, I'm punishing you, go out and, oh no, that's my other story. Basically, the little girl went outside, she came back in and she said, Jimmy put his stick in my pocketbook. And the mother, oh, that's okay, well, just go out and play. And the girl kept coming in, and she kept saying the same thing. And then it dawned on her mother, that pocketbook was the name that she had come up with for her vagina. Okay, so wouldn't it have been much better if she'd said, Tommy showed his penis to me out in the playground, and it made me feel confused. Grown-ups and older children have no business touching or playing with a child's private body parts. We often talk, well, when the doctor examines you, but again, mom is in the room, it's not secret, it's okay. Grown-ups and older children never need help from children with their private parts. Again, that deals with that, the 3 or 4 or 5 year difference with an older child and a younger child. Grown-ups and older children don't need help. And then it's important not to cross another child's body boundaries and touch their private parts. Again, we have to give them, we can't just say nobody should touch you. We have to say, and you should not touch other people also, because it might make them confused. And they need to have their own space. We need to be complete in our instructions to our kids. If this ever happens, if someone asks you to do this, tell me and another adult about it right away. If I'm not around, maybe tell another trusted person. We also need to tell little kids surprises are not the same as secrets. There's a difference, because surprises are meant to be shared and everybody hears about it and it's happy birthday party, something like that. But when someone is saying keep this a secret and it's never meant to be told, that's a red flag. If you're ever confused about private body parts, anything about your body or touching, you can ask me about it and I will help you. And we say it's easy if you start early and you talk often. Don't have the one big conversation. Don't save it for one time. You can weave these things into everyday life, when your kids are in the back seat and you're driving along, and you can talk about these things little bits at a time, just reinforcing it again and again. With the teens, it's important to also talk about what are the expectations with the family and the culture. Not every culture has the same feeling about sexual behavior. What are the responsibilities? What are the consequences? And importantly, telling kids early on that what are the characteristics of healthy relationships? Where there's respect, there's safety, there's equality, so that it's not, a 14-year-old boyfriend saying, well, you can't get on the phone with your girlfriends because we're in a relationship now. All of that date kind of stuff that we know can be difficult. Also, importantly, to tell them that alcohol and drugs can undermine your sexual safety. You might think it's fine, it has nothing to do with sex, but a number of victims have understood that when they are not in full command, they are more vulnerable. That doesn't mean they're to blame for it, but they're more vulnerable. And also having a safety plan. In case your teen finds him or herself in an unusual situation, they want out and they don't quite know how to get out. So they can always call you and say, has Aunt Gertrude showed up yet? Oh, my Aunt Gertrude's here for the weekend, I've got to go. Whatever it is, you come up with a safety plan so that your kids feel like if something ever should happen, that they're feeling like they're in a bad situation, there's a way they can reach out to you for support. Okay, we need to communicate with adults when there are concerns about their sexual behavior. And we just say, trust your instincts, write down what you have observed. You might find it strange that the coach keeps taking Jimmy to get ice cream and nobody else gets invited. Write it down, just put it on a piece of paper somewhere. Because maybe next season, you see the same behavior happening, but it's not Jimmy, it's Joey. Just try to write down if there's a male in the home and there's certain boundary violating behaviors going on, keeps barging into the bathroom when the teenage girl is showering, make a note of that. If you say don't do that, that's not good, but they keep doing it, make a note of it. You can always call Child Protective Services to discuss these cases, to see if you can get some support if it needs to be reported. Also, obviously, Enough Abuse has lots and lots of information there. We need to advocate for prompt intervention. If you suspect a child or a teen is being abused, you want to make sure that they get professional help. When you're concerned about their sexual behaviors around other people, you should stand up and say things. It's not okay for you to barge into, Janet's, when she's showering. I saw you do it once, but that should be it. You cannot do that. You need to respect her privacy. You need to set the boundaries when people are violating them. If you suspect, obviously you need to call the DCF, and here's the number for the Greenfield area office. After hours, the Child at Risk hotline is always there. And for abuse by others, not in the family, in the school, or by a caretaker, you can contact the local police there as well. DCF will evaluate the evidence. They'll include things you may not know. They can't tell you everything about other people who may have reported. And you can remain anonymous, although obviously there's a preference that you share, how you know this information. If you report, the kids are not going to be immediately removed from their homes. Professionals will work with your family to keep kids safe, if that's appropriate. Children's advocacy centers, gratefully now are all across the state. There are 12 centers. These are child-friendly centers. They have trained interviewers and staff. They bring together the police, the attorneys, the caseworkers, and the medical providers. And their goal is really to learn the truth, what really happened, how to protect the child, and then how to heal the family. Those are really the three major goals. And here is the information about the Children's Advocacy Center of Franklin and North Quadrant counties. If a child or teen discloses to you, stay calm. You are the adult in the room. Don't freak out and say, oh my gosh, I knew this was something that was going to happen. I always suspected that creep. You don't want to do that. You're the adult. You must stay calm. You can freak out later by yourself in your own room, but stay calm. You don't want to frighten the child from continuing to express themselves. Be supportive. Tell the child, I believe you. You are not to blame. So important. You were brave to tell, giving them, some good feedback. I will do my best to keep you safe. You can't promise them anything because you don't know how the court system will go or if it'll even go to court or what will happen, but you can say, I will try my best to keep you safe. That's, I think, a valid promise. Ask open-ended questions. Don't get into the nitty-gritty of things, because what we know is that when the forensic interviewers come in, they need to have a clean slate. They need to hear it from the child directly, not that what the child is saying has been influenced by maybe words that you use to describe it that the child then picked up. Again, just your job is to just listen, to be calm, to be supportive, and then to report any suspicion that you have to the appropriate authorities. Plan for safety. If you have a child, a teenager who says, my father's been raping me and I don't want to go home tonight, you have to make a safety plan. You want to make sure that that child is not in danger, because if the father finds out that the child has disclosed, that could be a dangerous situation. Notify other adults as necessary. But again, there should be confidentiality in these cases. If a child discloses to a teacher, the teacher shouldn't say, hey, Meg, come over here. What did you tell her what you just told me? No, you don't do that. And you don't have the child be having to tell another teacher and the substitute teacher and then the counselor and then the principal and then the super. That's why the CACs are so critical, because they really are trying to get the information once, completely, and confidentially. And get support for yourself, because there's a lot of vicarious trauma that can happen when you're involved in these cases. So you have to report. Why? Because you don't want kids to continue to be further abused. You want to tell kids that there's a strong, caring adult who is working to keep them safe, and you want to make sure they get quality services as soon as possible so they can start healing. For the abuser, you can possibly reach that person even before their behavior becomes illegal. If you see things and you're able to intervene safely, but if you're able to intervene, that's an important thing. You can encourage them to get qualified, to get treatment from a qualified professional. And again, MATSA is available. There are other networks of clinicians in the area. And hopefully you can help other children from being abused who are not even in the picture at that point. So we say the most important caring thing you can do for a family member, a friend, a colleague that's engaged in sexually inappropriate behavior is to make sure they stop. That's really the most critical piece. All right. I want to stop there. You've been great, attentive. I know I've thrown a lot out at you. There's so much more to share. But I wanted to share with you some ways that I think any community can rally around this issue and really take some positive, hopeful, concrete actions. Before I do that, though, I don't want to be the one-note samba here. Are there questions? Are there things that you want to talk about that were not covered in what I shared? Are there any questions that you have? We can refer you to other information. We can send you things by email. We can talk with you at other times. But don't be shy if there's any questions. And I'm going to stick around after this, so if you feel uncomfortable. Yes, please.
Sure. So I had a question.
Yeah.
Obviously, when it comes to disclosure, I think one of the largest barriers that folks face has to do with stigma. So I suppose my question would be, what efforts are being made just on a communal level, right, to address that particular issue?
Again, I think I may not have heard the first part of your question, so.
Right. So one of the biggest factors that is prohibited to disclosure is around stigma. I mean, it's a big issue, particularly with male youth, right? So when talking about things being done on a communal level, to reduce that stigma so that the door is a little bit more open, what efforts are being made there and what's helpful?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure I'm answering your question the right way, but the point is that we know that the teenage boys, often, and even adult male survivors will talk to me and say, I can't tell anybody because I love my two nephews, and if my brother and sister-in-law knew that I'd been a victim of child sexual abuse, they wouldn't want me taking the kids on the trip. I mean, this is really a sad thing. It's like double the victimization, isn't it? So I think, again, prevention is really the key. If we can allow teenage kids to talk about what is appropriate touch, what isn't, what is safety, what are the boundaries, we give them power to be able to say, even to a teacher, don't do that. That's not in our code of conduct. We can talk about that in this next list of things that I want to share with you about. Dr. Trant, did you have a response to him? I can see you're anticipating.
Yeah, I can.
Please.
So you bring up a great point, right? So the question about what is being done systemically and at a communal level to address the stigma that's associated with disclosure, right? So one of our colleagues, Dr. Scott Easton at the Boston College School of Social Work, is a prolific researcher who looks at this very specific issue. right? And when you look back retrospectively at what are some of the key factors that facilitate kind of delayed disclosure, a lot of it has to do with the nature of the relationship between the child victim and their abuser, right? Is it someone I know? Is it someone in a position of authority and power? All of these are dynamics that make it more difficult for someone to disclose. So I want to take a step back and talk systemically about, kind of what enough abuse, but I also want to kind of pivot over to what DA Sullivan was talking about earlier today, right? So when we talk, about the Massachusetts Legislative Task Force on the Prevention of Child Sexual Abuse that was founded in 2014, ultimately they went back and looked at what are best practices, amongst child abuse-serving organizations, schools, and other individuals who are working directly with children, right? And so their Safe Kid Thrive framework that they have put out really are best practices for any organization who are working with children, right? And so it's making sure that there's robust infrastructure to ensure that there's appropriate screening, and for anyone who has access to children, making sure that, again, as Jetta has talked about throughout today, that we're educating parents and other individuals who are working with children around normative psychosexual development, right? We don't want to pathologize normalcy, and we don't want to normalize pathology, right? So how do we help folks understand what is expected appropriate behavior and what could be a sign, right, or a symptom that's more problematic? How do we have robust systems, right, so that we can respond and we can be more attuned to, kind of these behavioral changes, so that we don't just say, I don't want to deal with this, but we can actually respond rapidly. And I think what we're doing here tonight is part of that, right? So I think, it's collectively as a society, talking about sex and sexual abuse is something that's extremely difficult, right? That at a systemic level and at a policy level, some tremendous work has been done, kind of through the Massachusetts Legislative Task Force, through the Safe Kids Thrive Initiative, through Enough Abuse. And I think what we're doing here tonight is part of that step, to make sure, right, that we can all raise our own consciousness and awareness on the factors that perpetuate sexual abuse, right? As Jetta talked about, so much of it has to do with secrecy. And at the end of the day, abuse happens in the context of relationships, but it can also, healing also happens in the context of relationships. So making sure that we can help support adults and other folks who are kind of close to children to be able to be empathic and supportive. So much of that goes into how do we help make it okay to disclose and to not shame, blame, and judge people.
Yes, there's someone in the back.
I used to work at an agency where, adults had to reach out to Corey and Corey. It was one of the agencies that doesn't have a lot of money. So they only did Massachusetts. So I'm wondering if there's any way, or maybe it's changed, that those inquiries before you started to be nationwide, is that a lot of money? Is that being done everywhere for teachers, for doctors, for anybody?
Yeah, let me just make a statement about the whole Corey thing. I mean, national risk management professionals tell us that in probably 90% of the cases of child molestation happening in schools, the person had a clean Corey chain. So, and why is that? Because those who abuse kids try to, smart about not having anybody disclose. They want to pick their victims carefully so that the kid is more vulnerable and less likely. So, and that's a great question, because it leads us to this issue of what's happening in schools and what should be happening in schools. I'm very disturbed about the 1 in 10 students from K through 12 experiencing some kind of inappropriate sexual behavior. And I think if we wait for cases in schools and in other places to be reported, we've already failed to some extent. We need to go way back to primary prevention and focus on, educating everybody, all the kids, all the students, all the adults, so that when we see these boundary violations, we can stop them before they escalate to illegal sexual offenses. I mean, that's really, I think, what the Enough Abuse campaign is working to do. And in that regard, I mean, we have developed, luckily, over the years, a lot of good, solid curricula. We talked about Dr. Finkelfor a few times. His center there in New Hampshire has reviewed all of our curricula to make sure that The citations are accurate, it's information that we can stand behind, so that gives us some confidence. But we have in-person trainings specifically for schools. We have also specifically for youth-serving organizations. And we have a 30-minute video called It's Not Just Jenna, which has been very powerful, particularly with 7th and 8th graders and high schoolers, because it talks about Jenna Quinn, who, by the way, a law in Texas has been named after her because she was a victim and she's become a national advocate. But the discussion guide that happens after the 30-minute video is very powerful. We have great evaluations from teens that say, wow, she was real, she wasn't an actress, and wow, the discussion was great. I heard from my friends that I didn't even know that they were interested in this kind of thing. Anyway, good stuff, all on our website. Here is the understanding and responding to sexual behaviors of children. We're currently working right now with our close colleague, Joan Tabachnik, to update this to include a section on problematic sexual behaviors of children, because schools and youth organizations really need to know when they see this behavior, what is it and how do they respond to it so children can heal and they won't be misrepresented or misinterpreted. I'm really happy about this particular tool that we have. This is a 1-hour online course. We were doing a lot of training in schools, and I remember one day a 7th and 8th grade health class had taken on sexual abuse as their topic. We were asked to come in, and as a result of all that great discussion, the students went to their principal and said, we want everybody in our school to get trained. And so I thought, hey, this is great. That was easy. I walked in and talked to the principal. She listened to everything. She said, I agree with 100% of what you said, and I can't do it. There's no way that I can get all the teachers, all the substitutes, the coaches, the security guard, the food service people in one room for even 1 hour to talk about this important issue. You've got to come up with an online course that's going to really do the trick. And we kind of, thought about it and said, yeah, but there's so much more you can talk about when you have an audience and you can have exchanges. But we thought, this will reach more people quicker. And so we were able to get Simmons University School of Social Work to do a randomized controlled study in 3 different states with teachers of this course. And the results were off the top. It was published in the Journal on Child Sexual Abuse. So Dr. Trent was right. We're not evidence-based yet. We're promising. We're evidence-informed, but we're waiting for that second research study. But this has just been great. And I wanted to tell you that I was hoping she would be here tonight, but back in 1920, that academic year, Jordana Harper, who's the superintendent here in Greenfield, reached out to us and said, I want to educate all of my 200 and some odd employees. And so all of them completed the course. And this is just a few of the statistics that came out of that evaluation. 91% said they had increased knowledge about CSA and prevention, of a high percentage, more likely to notice and report boundary violations, which was one of our goals. 34% rated their knowledge of CSA low or moderate before the training, and after it, 79% rated their knowledge high. This is really great feedback. And then this is, for me, very important. Almost all of them said they would support their school adopting a comprehensive code of conduct that would identify and prohibit boundary violating behaviors. And so we are looking to follow up with Superintendent Jordana Harper to make sure that we can help them assess their current code. We now have a very comprehensive code. It's 25 pages. It's been developed by survivors and national experts, and we're ready to launch it with schools so that we can make sure that they're not just training, because training is half a loaf. Training without policies, you're not going to get the kind of outcome that you're really looking for. Anyway, just quickly, one of the things that we are launching now is called Safety Stars. We have a number of schools across the state. I think we have about 15,000 school employees that have completed this online course. We have 150 schools that have participated. And now what we're doing is we're trying to take them from the training piece to the policy piece. And so we've kind of come up with this, earn your safety stars. Can't do it all overnight, but if you can earn them over time, become a gold star school. Screen prospective staff to keep out unsafe individuals. We've got about 14 states now that have actually passed legislation developing standardized screening tools that include questions like, have you ever been investigated for sexual misconduct? Have you ever surrendered your license in lieu of an investigation? Have you ever had your license officially revoked? Can we contact your previous employer to ask these same questions. And if they say yes, that means that that gets the school off the hook in terms of a lawsuit if they share information. In any case, we have legislation that really looks into that here in Massachusetts that's pending. Obviously, training the staff is important, but as I said, is half a loaf. Assessing a school's policy or a YSO's policy, we have a comprehensive assessment tool that really helps us, a leadership team in a school say, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that, that's great, those are your strengths, where are the gaps? How do we develop an annual working plan that's going to meet that gap? How do we measure our success? We're really trying to quantify this, and the Safety Stars program will do that. This is an important one. Responding to boundary violating behaviors with tested protocols. We're getting very concerning anecdotal feedback from the media and from lawyers who are involved in these cases that school administrators and YSO directors have not received training about how to respond to a boundary violation behavior. They know how to report. They've all gotten mandated reporter training, but that doesn't get into sexual abuse very much at all. And it certainly doesn't tell them what they should do when a teacher comes and says, I saw Joe having a romantic dinner on Saturday night with his 14-year-old student in science class. You can't report that to DCF, right? It's not against the law to have dinner with someone. But does it violate the boundary? Does it violate the specific item in your code of conduct that says you may not do this? So we are working now to develop actual protocols that says, if this happens, this is who should notify the person that a report has been made about a boundary violation. This is who should be in the room. This is who should facilitate the conversation. You know, this is what you should do if the person says, screw you, I can have dinner with whoever I want, versus someone that says, oh my God, I didn't realize that was a boundary violation. Oh, I don't want to do that, help me. We have to monitor the behavior. We have to make sure that once it's reported, it's corrected. And right now we're hearing things like the director of the school in Middleton, a technical school, the chef has been violating boundaries left and right. The kids were upset. They told their parents. The principal's response was to bring all the kids into one room with the chef so they could make nice and talk about developing signs, signals for him, so that if he was getting too close or violating the boundaries, they could do this signal so that that would give him a message that he should back off. This is, to me, outlandish, that the children would be caused to come together to kind of somehow figure this out. You know, that's unacceptable. And there are other anecdotes, too, of a principal who was so averse to conflict that she tripped all over herself, apologizing to this person who was violating boundaries. I'm so sorry that I had to bring you on. You must be so embarrassed. I'm sorry that the kids really love you. I don't want you to think that we're not happy. Can you imagine? This is not the way that you confront a report of boundary violating behaviors. I could go on with examples. And so we're working right now. We're trying to create a new tool that's really going to help administrators get some confidence in terms of how they should respond. And then, of course, securing physical spaces, because there are a lot of nooks and crannies in some of these old school buildings that create opportunities, doors that are not locked, closets that are, in an obscure part of the campus. And so we, again, have tools that we can help people use to do an environmental scan of their school. Where are the red light places that kids don't want to go? It's creepy. They don't want to go there. What are the green light places where kids feel really happy? What can we do to correct those red light spaces? Can we put more cameras? Can we put more, more security? Can we get rid of some of the bushes around the building? Whatever it takes. But we are really launching now, in this next several months, a kind of a pilot for the Safety Stars. And we're going to be looking to involve schools that have already done the training of their staff. And we're going to be working with them to bring them to the other parts of training, to the screening, to the assessment of their policies, and working with them so they have a really comprehensive set of strategies, and not just, we talked about this once in our school, and we're done now. We don't have to do this for another 3 or 4 years. That ain't going to cut it. So we're trying to really be smart about all of this prevention stuff. We have a poster that we created. We realized that about almost 40 states had passed laws mandating schools to post posters telling kids where to go if they wanted to report something. And so we looked at all of those posters. We didn't like any of them. Some of them were just had girls or just had boys, and what about different minorities? And some of them were scary, and that the word abuse was big. And so we decided we would create something more neutral. You should always feel safe where you live, learn, and play. If someone has hurt you, it's important to tell an adult you trust, like a parent, a teacher, a school resource officer, a counselor, a school nurse, or call. That's the number for the Child at Risk Hotline. We really want kids to do this part, not this part. And then, of course, we were thrilled to be able to have the Mass Association of School Superintendents endorse the poster, and also the Massachusetts School Nurse Managers Organization also endorsed it. So I actually didn't know if anybody from schools were going to be here tonight, but I did bring a number of those posters, and I'm happy to share them with this school nurse here, and perhaps she can share them with other nurses across the county. I think I thought you had about 9 schools. I don't know if we have 9 schools in Greenfield.
districts. We have 6 schools here, but we have 3 different school districts. Four different districts here right now. So.
Okay. Well, again, there's more where this came from, but I wanted to make sure that I left these with you. So we actually, just before COVID, we did a major training of school nurse managers in 3 of the 5 regions of the state. 60, 70 nurses in each one of those meetings. And I would say to them, okay, the posters are in the back of my car, so meet me in the parking lot. And they would line up literally and say, I need 10 for my school, or I need this many. So we do have more, but I did bring about 50 of them for you here tonight. Also, the last thing here, we're a small staff. Money for child sexual abuse prevention has been very difficult. Foundations don't like to touch the issue. We are getting a little bit of state money. We hope to get more in this next budget, which is about to pass, hopefully in the next month or so. And so we said, we need to find a way for anybody, any citizen, any ambassador, as the DA kept referring to you all, to be able to go online and say, I want to do something that's concrete, achievable, that I can actually do. And so we have 25 pledges on this particular website. And they're all the way from, I want to talk to my 4-year-old about body boundaries, versus I want to go to my school with a set of comprehensive strategies or a code, or in other words, we've got the learners, the educators, the community promoters, the safety promoters. We've given categories to each of these levels. And what happens is you pick a pledge, and you immediately get an email saying, thank you for pledging to teach your 5-year-old about safety, but here are 3 vetted resources online that you can go to that will give you the knowledge and the confidence to be able to carry your pledge through. That's essentially the goal of it all. We've had we haven't had the money to promote it actively, but we're hoping to do that in the next year. But we have had, there's also a map of the country, and we now have almost all the states have taken some pledges, and we actually have a number of foreign countries that are now listed. So you'll see Sierra Leone and Nigeria and some other states. That's the great thing about the World Wide Web, right? There's no boundaries there. So people are taking advantage in these poor countries of the resources that we have online. So that's really great. I am going to stop there. And I don't know what time it is. I have no idea if we're over or under. I tend to get very passionate about this work. As you can see, there's so much to share. I try to talk as fast as I can so I can give you as much as you can take in. But I'm open to more questions. Dr. Trant is here to respond if any of you have some specific questions, or just general comments. Has this been helpful tonight? Have you learned something new? Have you gotten the sense that, oh, there is something that I could do. I could manage to do something important here. Because that's really the purpose of tonight, really, is to create those ambassadors that D.A. Sullivan talked about. So let me stop talking and hear from you all, even if it's just to say, yeah, I like this, or I didn't like it, or I wish you had talked more about this or that. We're always looking for feedback, We're a learning organization. We have no pride of authorship. We're always looking to do things better. Anyway. Soraya, say something.
Yes, I was looking around to see if anyone was going to say something.
Question in the back.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Will your presentation be on the CAC website? Because I was...
No, primarily because this particular set of slides were put together for this particular presentation tonight. We have some sense of proprietariness about this because we have had experiences where someone has just said, oh, well, I can go and do that myself without any training, without any supervision, without being certified to kind of know that they're the person who can do this well. We also are constantly changing the data to keep it updated and au courant. And so we don't want old copies out there that have old information. So we're trying to just, balance that. It's sometimes not easy, but that's been our general policy. Yes?
I think the question might have been whether people can watch the video of your presentation here.
Oh, the
which they
video.
absolutely will be. It will be on GCTV.
Yes, well,
and will be available.
Philippe, talk to us, Philippe.
You'll be able to find it on Greenfield CTV, which is GCTV's YouTube page. It'll be available on TV, on channel 17 or 9. And I think that's about it, yeah. Excuse me?
Do you know when it will be available?
I've got a graduation this weekend, so I think next week, early next week. Yeah.
And how
I'd
many
be
times
happy.
will it likely show? I know in some communities it shows fairly...
I can't really tell, like, because I don't do the programming for the airing, I just do the production, but I did a video this week, and I saw it just by chance airing on our television station 3 times. So if something's new, if it's active, it's important, something that relates to the community like this does and the safety of children, we'll probably air it quite often. Not only on our government channel, probably on our government channel, but definitely on our entertainment channel, Channel 9 Comcast. But the easiest and quickest way is to go to our YouTube page, and you'll see it there.
And we'll promote that through the space.
And you can share it and add links to your website as well.
That's wonderful. Great, great. And there's so much more to be shared. We're available. I left a little card on each desk just in case any of you wanted to get in touch with me directly, but I would encourage you to go to enoughobuse.org. There's lots and lots of information there. There are downloadable documents and news articles and all kinds of things. So if you want to learn more about even problematic sexual behaviors, we've started to propagate that part of the website with more information, and there'll be more coming up on that as well. Yes, please, Soraya.
So I just want to say, as far as feedback goes, this presentation alone, I feel like it addresses everybody. So whether it's teacher, physician, community, youth organizations, I have to say that everything that you've talked about tonight definitely resonated with me. And I don't want to speak for everyone else, but I can imagine that anyone who's working with children on a day-to-day basis or, is in the community with children can resonate with all of the information that you gave us today.
Well, actually, Soraya is a guest here tonight. She's from New Bedford, and we met her about a month or so ago at the State House when we were working with Senator Lovely on an event, a legislative briefing, and she's a nurse out in New Bedford, and she wanted to come tonight to kind of see what does this kind of thing look like, because she intends to go to South Coast Hospital and get them to co-sponsor an event like this in the New Bedford area, and also hopefully with the DA and perhaps the CAC in that neck of the woods as well. So thank you for coming tonight.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Trent, I can't see the time here, so I don't know.
I was just going to step
We're
up
done.
and say, and we're perfectly on time.
Oh,
So
good.
thank you, Jetta. We appreciate you being
You're
here.
so welcome.
And thank you to everyone who came out and spent your evening with us. You are part of the solution, so thank you so much for spending your time with us.
Great. Okay.